So let's give a warm welcome to Chad Spensky, who is a CEO of Authenticate and will be presenting. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for making it to the 9 a.m. session. I know last night, for some of us at least, was a pretty long night. I'm waiting for a clicker, and I will show you my first slide. I was told that they were actually explicitly looking for a controversial talk, so I think I might be that controversial talk. So, it's always good to start by making friends, so I decided I would come to a Passwordless conference and make the bold statement that Passwordless is a fool's errand, just to kind of brighten everybody's morning and make sure that we're all here for the same reason. Before you get offensive, before you get offended by that, I want to first highlight that I am the biggest fool in the room here as far as trying to go passwordless. So I started my career as a hacker as a kid, so I was the one breaking all this stuff, doing, let's just say, questionably legal things. I then went into the academic route full force, so I got a bachelor's degree in computer science. I dropped out of a PhD actually over the passwordless idea. I was so gung-ho that this was going to work that I dropped out of my doctorate, went to MIT Lincoln Laboratory, where I pursued this at depth, went back for another PhD that I did finish, and then literally named my company Authenticate. So if anyone has been beating this dead horse for a long time, it's been since 2009 that this was really my mission that I set out on and the molehill that I plan to die on. So first, let's talk about authentication. That's what we're all here to do. We call it passwords, but at the end of the day, there's one goal. We want everybody to be able to access everything they should be able to access, and the hard part is that others cannot. That's the little caveat on the end there. We could just have open systems, and the first part is satisfied. And the problem actually comes down to bridging this human-computer gap. So computers are very, very good at authenticating to other computers. Cryptographers have done an absolutely fantastic job and pulled off like literal mathematical miracles, and yet we're still stuck with this problem of how do we know that it's the right human talking to that computer. So there's really, the three paradigms. I'm going to give you a little refresher here because it's going to make sense later on how you authenticate to a computer. So you can either do a shared secret, something I put in my brain and something I put in the computer's brain, and then we regurgitate those to each other to verify that it's the same person. Something you have, this is, go way back to the dark ages, we made skeleton keys, and that was just something you have to open doors, and we can fast forward, the something you have is still here today, and something you are. So this is, a biometric. This is how humans identify each other, actually. Everybody that I met last night, I could see this morning, I could identify you purely based on your biometric and some shared secrets, some information that we shared with each other. So just to highlight where the password came from, back in the day, human to computer ratio was about 1-to-1 for the people who were privileged enough to even have access to a computer. Passwords were not there to block nation-state actors. They weren't seen as this end-all be-all of security. It was like, hey, this is to make sure that the people who have access to the mainframe have access to the mainframe, and the others get into their right home directories. It wasn't expected to blow up to the scale that it is now, where billions of people are using this mechanism. So some stories from the battlefield since then. A lot has happened, and I'm going to go through this in kind of chronological order just to get to where we got today. So first, we just released passwords. This is back in the 90s. Things were gravy. We're all logging in online. People were stealing the password databases or just guessing the passwords, so we implemented hashing. So hashing beat just breaking in and stealing the text file with everybody's username and password. So then came offline brute forcing. So it's like, okay, people would still steal the database, but it's hashed. So then they would just run it through, MD5 algorithm or whatever, SHA-256, whatever you're using to hash your passwords, and then they just brute force offline and crack the passwords. This gave us the greatest thing of all in the password world. We got complex passwords. Hey, they're supposed to be, harder to brute force. Even when you salt the hash, people came up with rainbow tables and all these cool things. So now we put one more, kind of Band-Aid on top. Like, no, we will stick with this, right? And then there was online brute forcing. The way to beat online brute forcing was to just limit retries or throttle. So that one was actually a very good fix. It's still used today. that is like the end-all be-all of kind of the brute forcing world. For the database dump, you just have to make sure you don't get exploited. So moving over to the other side, I'm actually going to go bottom up over here, going to do a little loop. So then there were the password reset attacks. This was one that was really popular back in like the AOL Instant Messenger days. They would tell you like, hey, to figure out your porn star name, you would say like, you know, what street you grew up on, your first dog, and your mother's maiden name, and those were, you know, the password reset questions. So there was like all these novel little schemes of like, hey, this is a cute, funny thing to do, and I just stole your password, or stole your account by your password reset. And then we had password reuse. So once this started to explode, we went from 1 password to, you know, like 100. People started reusing them. We put password managers on top of that. And then the nail in the coffin was phishing, where I send you a really nicely crafted email, and you know, you just give me your password. So no amount of security was going to fix that. And this is where we added this something you have. We went back into our bag of tricks, said, hey, the something you know is not sufficient. We're going to add a second factor. So welcome to the world of 2FA. So oh, did I miss one? So the Authenticate landscape today, we all have lots of username, hundreds of passwords. I had 487 passwords. Matt Miller, who reviewed my slides, told me these are Bush League numbers, and I really need to lean into the internet more. I think he had something like the 800 range. So, you know, still new to the internet, figuring things out. We all have password managers or some sort of way that we're managing these hundreds of sites. We have multiple different authenticator apps. I'm sure if you go to anyone's phone in here, you probably have at least 3 or 4 different apps that are authenticating you. We have SSO protocols. There's at least 2 popular ones. You're probably using SAML every day in your enterprises and OIDC. Every time you click, you know, log in with Google, log in with Facebook. However, hackers on the other side have now phishing as a service. Any of us can go on here and pay $50 a month, typical SaaS service, and they will phish any person you want at a very high success rate. So as Buzz Lightyear says, this is what winning looks like. So, you know, we're doing all of this stuff on the defensive side. We're all struggling, and you can just, any, you know, script kiddie on the internet can go point click and steal our credentials. But we have options, and this is what we've been working with as an industry, right? So we've gone through smart cards, USB and NFC tokens, we have OTP tokens, biometrics, and now SMS OTP. For some reason has taken off even though it has really no added security. So the perks, you know, when you go look at smart cards, the security on those is fantastic. It's absolutely hardened to the max. They have anti-tamper, all these amazing things. They don't really scale. There's bad usability. There's not a lot of smart card, you know, I don't see many iPhones with smart card readers plugged into the bottom. And they just really hit like a usability wall as far as being mass adoption. OTP tokens are hard to clone, but you really get 1 per service. There's something to carry. They're not scalable, so like the RSA tokens. Biometrics have the perk that they're nothing to carry, but they're mutable. They do actually change. My voice today is slightly different from last night because I'm not dealing well with the dryness of California. I'm used to the humidity of Texas. They're irrevocable, so if somebody steals my biometric, like right now, you deepfake my voice, that's it, game over. I'm not gonna go get a new voice tomorrow. And they're non-transferable. So there's been a lot of talk here about, you know, sharing passkeys. There's a lot of instances you'd want to do that. I cannot share my biometrics. Say my fiance called me and, hey, I need to, you know, get into your car, but it uses my thumb to unlock the car. You know, that's it. She has to wait for me to come back. And then all of the SMS OTP and a lot of these OTP things are actually phishable. So if you get a good sophisticated phishing attack, these get phished as well. So the password still reigns supreme, which is frustrating, and that is actually why we're all in this conference. They're cheap to implement, they're standardized, their users are comfortable, they're recoverable, and they're terribly insecure, the most important point on this entire slide. So there are a couple notable academic ideas. So as somebody who used to live in the ivory tower and sit there with my doctor title on and, you know, pontificate about things, I think there's a couple ideas that are really, really good in academia that just never really took on in industry, but I think they're worth looking at as we now go forward with, you know, passwordless future. One that was absolutely fantastic was called the web of trust. So there's the PKI model where you have certificate authorities and they vouch on behalf of websites and users. And there's a web of trust model where I would meet people at this conference that I trust. We could actually like tap our phones and we would sign each other's keys. And then I can now use them as a CA. So my phone and the trust and everything built up in my life is built around humans that I actually trust. This didn't go, I don't know, it didn't really take off back in the day because you'd have to go key sharing parties and you'd bring your USB stick and you'd all plug your USB stick in and sign each other's keys. Today with smartphones, I think it's worth looking at a resurgence of this. We all have passkeys on our phone. We could, in theory, go around and tap each other's phones and sign each other's passkeys. And then if some sort of attack comes in, we all can, in the background, our phones could mesh with each other and build this view of the internet to verify, hey, is something suspicious here? Did this IP change? Is this cert the same cert that you're seeing on this new website? So that one, I think we're in a really cool opportunity to bring that back. The other one that I find interesting, the internet has actually been passwordless for about, 10 years, something like that, since I think like TLS 1.1 or 1.2. TLS actually has mutual authentication in it. You can do client-side certs. When I was at MIT, this is how we logged on to everything. Everybody would get their client-side cert, and you'd go to a website, and we never typed in a password. Your client-side cert was stored in your keychain or whatever on your computer. So I just think it's interesting to note that this has been there. And in fact, in my research back in the early, 2012, we were looking at passwordless solutions, and our initial thought was, hey, we're going to just take TLS because it works. And when it goes to sign the client-side cert, we're going to store that client-side cert on our phone and then just prompt the phone, and then that will authenticate us. And we're like, this is great. It's backward compatible. It requires no new protocols. Yet we created a whole brand new protocol, and we have passkeys now. But I think it's interesting to note that this has been done before, and it failed miserably. The other one that I think is really notable is Squirrel. I don't actually know the guy that made Squirrel, but I've been kind of a fan and following him from the sideline forever. It was a huge passwordless push around the same time that FIDO was coming up, where you would have QR codes and you could scan these QR codes and they would log you into everything. And it was fully built out. It was open source. And again, most of the people in this room have probably never heard of it, and I don't think anyone has used it to log on to anything notable. And the last and final one, which is where I cut my teeth in passwordless, back in 2004, Carnegie Mellon went full passwordless and keyless. They had a smartphone app on Nokia bricks in the research world that you could scan QR codes on doors and unlock buildings with proof-carrying authentication, so there's no CAs, it was fully distributed, and then you could use those same certs to log into computers. It was super cool, getting into academia in this world. I'm like, this is it, this is the future, and academia had moved on, saying this was problem solved, and I continued down this path to stand here before you today and give you some thoughts and ideas from the academic world. So back to passwordless, I digress. We went on a little journey there of the history to get to where we are. So let's look at smartphone-based passwordless solutions. On the surface, these look amazing. There's nothing new to carry. Everybody already has a smartphone in their pocket. The security is actually incredible. We've got to build processors from the ground up, and ARM has baked a lot of good stuff in there. We got to take all of the lessons learned from the operating system world and now redo those better on smartphones. So the entire security architecture is probably the best it has ever been. They have a lot of cool interfaces. They can talk to everything because they're our lifeblood now. They're very usable. We don't have to train users how to use smartphones. Users are already comfortable with them, and they're already with them. So this is it, the panacea, right? Passwords are dead. This is going to be our future. To use them as a credential store, here's a quick guide. You're going to store some credentials in the secure hardware on the phone. You're going to use those credentials through various apps and interfaces. This should sound a lot like passkeys to all of you. And we're going to enjoy a perfect passwordless life. So a couple really nice benefits. The number one thing they teach in academia is you want to minimize the trusted computing base. This is the number of lines of code and number of devices and physical hardware components that you have to trust for your system to succeed. So if you do this properly, we should be trusting, a couple thousand lines of code on a phone and maybe one chip on that phone and a couple, components of the main application processor. We also now know exactly where the attackers are coming, and we can maintain physical possession at all times. So last time we were all in a pool party, we were joking our keys are on our phone, they're with us, we drop them in the pool, they're gone. But that's also really reassuring, right? They are with me at the pool. They're not in the cloud or scattered about all my different devices on Earth. So a lot of people see this and think this is a terrible idea. So if you look at it instead from an attacker standpoint and a military strategy, if you've ever seen the movie 300, the only way you beat the Persians as the Spartans is to bring them into a choke point. So what we're doing as an industry is creating these digital choke points. It's like, hey, I now know exactly where the attackers are coming, and I can fortify all my defenses there. Whereas previously, defending a corporate network, it could be anywhere. You have all these different password implementations. Maybe one of them used a weak hash or didn't hash the password at all, and that's normally where things blow up, or just one thing is phishable, and ba-boom. But right now, okay, if you want me, you gotta run on this stage right now, tackle me, and grab my phone. That's a much better feeling. So kind of mentally, I always think of this as, put all our good eggs in one basket, and then just watch that basket. So here's all our credentials. They're in this basket. We know where they're coming, and we actually have a chance of defending them. There's a problem, though. If you ask what if enough, so I have a 12-year-old, and this is always questioning, right? Why? What if? What if? What if? So if you keep asking these questions, it falls apart pretty quickly, and this is a bummer. So what if you lose your phone? Okay, we can sync passkeys. We can do cool revocation backups. Okay, what if I lose my voice? What if I lose my fingerprints? What if I have a facial injury? What if I want to give somebody access temporarily, just for like a minute and then take it back? Like I had a FedEx guy call me yesterday, hey, I'm at your office. How do I get in and drop the package off? What if there's a software exploit and we have all our eggs in one basket, but you can exploit that basket? So, this argument does start to fall apart pretty quickly. So it seems like the panacea as an academic and all the industry folks here, we got very excited, this is gonna be it. But we have to be very careful. Hence, the previous solutions that have been deployed and have never made it to the big time. So one thing, if you leave this talk with any, one piece of information, is the idea that biometrics are flawed. There's a lot of hype and fanfare around biometrics, thinking that this is going to be, the only way we authenticate in the future and sort of the end-all, be-all of authentication. And I want to caution you to proceed with extreme caution. So as I said before, they're irreplaceable. So now, especially with all of the AI stuff out there, if your biometric data is stolen, right? Say you were able to replicate my finger good enough to trick a fingerprint sensor. That is it. Like, I can no longer ever use that biometric because it is leaked, it is gone, it is burned. They're irrevocable. There's a lot of cases where you want to revoke a credential, right? My biometric just got stolen. I would like to revoke that and do something different. They are actually breakable. So I know, you're going to say, oh, Face ID hasn't been broken. All of these things have not been broken. The thing to put on the end of that sentence is yet. Everything is hackable. With enough money, enough motivation, everything can and will be hacked. I was an offensive hacker for the DoD for about 10 years. My whole life was breaking things, and there has never, not once, ever been a target we didn't succeed on. I think that is generally true in the offensive community. So to think that this is, never going to happen is not true. Very interesting cases. My advisor in grad school convinced me. I was, young and starry-eyed and all about biometrics. This is the future. And he's like, Chad, let me give you a case, real-world case. Mercedes-Benz made cars that you can unlock and start with your fingerprint. So what the thieves would do is they would wait for the person who owned the car to walk up to the vehicle, grab them, cut their finger off, and steal the car. He's like, there are many cases where you actually want to be able to give up your credential. He's like, gun to your head, do you want to blurt your PIN out, or do you want them to take you with them to go empty your bank account? It's like, that has stuck with me forever. I'm like, maybe I was wrong about biometrics. And, as the password champion of the conference, I want to point out that passwords have some really great attributes. There's something metric, like emergencies can necessitate transferring of credentials, right? Like I just said, my fiance is back in Texas. If she were to call me right now, hey, I really need to get into your computer, some family emergency thing, it is actually nice that I can just transfer a password over the phone to her on the spot, bang, it works. In fact, for that FedEx guy yesterday, we have a PIN set up at our office on the front door that I was able to get give him so he could get in and deliver the FedEx package while my employees were out at lunch. So it is actually nice to be able to transfer them. And, not a popular opinion, but if we get down to 1 or 2 passwords, they are actually very easy to remember, right? If you only had 1 password, I'm not advocating that company, I work for Authenticate, but say you had 2 passwords, so it doesn't look like a pitch, you could remember that. And if you're using only those 2 passwords ever in your life, they could be highly complex, really unique, and it would be manageable. Hot take, a PIN is a less secure password. So this comes up a lot where I see, passwordless solutions, and it's like, oh, but it falls back to a PIN. I love the marketing of passwordless. I think we stick with that word as a community. But as practitioners, I want to make sure that we don't, convince ourselves that we're actually getting away from the something you know factor. If you look at this from an attacker standpoint, it has far less entropy because, say we have a 4-digit PIN, so what, it's 10 to the 4, versus if you gave me a 10-character password, it is far more secure. So what we really want, and what I've been advocating for I guess, the past decade with my research, I would always say, like, my phone knows me better than any other human on earth, right? I take it with me literally everywhere. I don't take all my friends and family into the bathroom with me and on every vacation and on stage at a conference. But my phone is there. It actually can listen to my voice in the background. It has accelerometers. It can know my gait. It knows my GPS coordinates. So my advocacy is what we're really looking for here, and kind of what you're seeing around this conference, is we have one very strong password to the phone, or way to authenticate, and then we let that phone speak on our behalf to the rest of the digital world. Back to my initial comment, computers are very, very good at authenticating to other computers. The sucky part is the human-computer interface. So because we have these phones, and they can kind of learn and really deeply understand who we are, and then they can know when they're not in our possession, that paradigm actually can become very beautiful. So how do we do this? This has actually been the crux of my career, and all of my academic research was surrounding this. It turns out it's possible, which is awesome, and I think we're seeing that, right? We're finally seeing passkeys roll out because this is actually possible. It's no longer a pipe dream. So every phone on Earth has a secure element. They were initially put on there for NFC payment transactions. They've since opened up the APIs so anybody can store keys in there. You can generate public-private key pairs, and this is the exact same chip that's in your credit card. It's all the same, anti-tamper. It's the same stuff that's in a smart card in your phone. We can then interact with these keys using trusted execution environments. Every phone on Earth uses an ARM processor. They all use TrustZone. TrustZone is a separate, secure world. So you can think of it as 2 processors put on the same silicon wafer, or same silicon die. So you can actually turn off everything. You can go into the secure world, turn off the accelerometer, take over the screen, turn off all possible side channels, and have a nice trusted interaction with the human to verify, say a financial transaction. I'm wiring $100 to Chad, and you can know for a fact that was signed from your bank. You can see the message they sent you and reply. Caveat, this doesn't exist yet. It's very hard. I know Google had Trusty, that they were talking about doing this. Trustonic a while back had a way to do this, but we need to solve that problem as an industry to really go forward. We employ hardware anti-damper techniques, biometrics for convenience, but not for end-all be-all security. Passwords will actually still be there as the last level. Call it a PIN, call it a password, whatever you want. It's something you know. We support a hybrid trust model. I think you'll see this hopefully come back, that we can use PKI to bootstrap, but I think it's a really good opportunity that we use a web of trust. The government calls this cyber resilience. I actually think that is a really good word. So once, say my phone were to get hacked, the rest of the people in my web would still be safe because they would all have other people that they could rely on. And then we need to use novel recovery schemes. So, kind of maybe the theme of this conference, but at least for me, is like, we've ticked a lot of these boxes, and then the what if I lose my phone question still comes up a lot. So my favorite has always been social-based authentication, where I would shard my key out to people that I trust, and then if I lose my phone, I could go to those trusted individuals, and they can help me recover my private key. And this is all, thanks to mobile phones being highly connected and all this awesome stuff. It is actually possible. So The goal was to make sure that everybody has access, others cannot. The problem was the human gap. Solution, in my mind, is sophisticated smartphones and passwords. So, to quote two of my favorite quotes, if you've seen the show Cheer, it's the greatest show ever on Netflix. It's about competitive cheerleading. They always say, we can, we must, we will. And since I'm from Houston, JFK gave this speech in Houston, so I will give it here again today, that we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And I think you saw that at the keynote of 60,000 hours or whatever it took for FIDO. My whole career has been dedicated to this. It is going to happen, but it is going to be very hard. So thank you very much. You can email me if you have questions. I see that I'm out of time. And thank you for showing up to the 9 a.m. session.
Let's give Chad a warm applause. Thank you. We do not have time for questions today, but if you do have questions for Chad, please feel free, send them to info@FIDO Alliance, and we will redirect them back to Chad. So thank you all for attending.